tired of some of these modern games that don't allow you a lot of freedom, well, you might want to check out Ultima 6. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie, and it's still one of the best open world games in my opinion. Now, Ultima 6 came out in 1990, and it absolutely just blew my mind because it was one of the most immersive and open world games that I'd ever played. Now, next to the Elder Scrolls series like Oblivion, Morrowind, and Skyrim, it still stands as one of my favorite games. Ultima 6 just had an incredible level of immersion. You could touch any object, move any object, pick it up, steal it. Also, the characters had their own daily routines. It was the first time I ever saw that, which they would wake up, go to work, go to lunch at the bar or tavern, and then also go back to their home and sleep in the night. You could break into their house. You also could attack any given NPC that you wanted. You could get arrested. It just was incredible in terms of the level of flexibility that you had to play the game, and I never had ever seen anything like that before. So why would you consider playing such an old game if it was made back in 1990? Well, the very reason that I stated was that it still is one of the most open world games out there. Even more so when you compare it to some games like Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim, when you consider certain aspects of it, such as the ability to move any given object. But ultimately, Ultima 6 is cheap. It's either free, so you can obtain it as pretty low cost. So your risk of playing it in terms of what you lose is very little. Unlike a lot of games which can cost anywhere from $30 to $70 a pop, some of the modern games. But also, it doesn't require a lot of computing power. Pretty much any modern computer these days can run it. The original version that came out in 1990 came out in VGA in 256 colors. In my opinion, it still looks great, still looks colorful. I still love that colorful artwork style, even though things do look slightly pixelated. But I think the artwork still looks great, and it doesn't require a lot of computing power, so you can put it on your laptop, you can put it on your games machine, and it's really easy to use on multiple platforms. Now, the story of Ultima 6 is the general story of the Ultima series, which you as a character, from Earth, you're known as the Avatar, which you actually are pulled by this moonstone to this fictional world of Britannia. And basically, you're like a prophet that helps in given times of need for Britannia. And in this given situation, in Ultima 6, there's appearance of these gargoyles, which are these demon-like creatures, and they're actually looking for you. So your job is to find out what do they want, what is their history, and why they're attacking people, and what is the actual source of the gargoyles. Now, I can't tell you too much without spoiling the stories, because half the fun of it is discovering the story, unraveling as you go, and engaging yourself in the open world. But it's take my word for it, it's worth checking out for the actual story in itself. Now, there's different ways to play Ultima 6. There's a PC version, there's emulated versions like Super Nintendo and Amiga, there's Ultima Online, there's also the 3D version, and there's also a fully voice-acted version. I'll talk about the PC version first. This is the first version that I played, and this is probably the best option for most because it's the easiest to install. You can go to GOG.com and download Ultima 6. It's packaged with a couple other of the Ultimas, and it's pretty much plug and play, because the mission of GOG is to take some of the old DOS games and make them easy to play on Windows platforms that you just simply use the installer and you're ready to go without having to do any configuration. The other way is to play an emulated version using an emulated console, like a Super Nintendo emulator or Amiga emulator, which acts like those old machines, and then you download the respective ROM and use it that way. Now, I tried the Amiga version, which isn't bad. I've also tried the Super Nintendo version, which is pretty watered down, in my opinion. Super Nintendo and Nintendo back then were ultimately targeted for kids. So with that, they dumbed down the user interface and took away some of the nice-to-haves that didn't have any functional purpose, like playing an instrument, and being able to play it on your own accord. Also, because the console version you'd use controllers as opposed to the keyboard, they changed the interface to be a little bit more simplified on that basis. And I think it takes away a lot from the immersive experience. However, the good point of that is that it's pretty easy to install if you're familiar with using emulated games. The process is no different. You simply fire up your emulator software and load the ROM, and you're ready to go. So it's one of the easier options out there, and that's the good point of it. Now the third way is there's also Ultima 6 Online. Now this is a bit of a novelty project, but you can play Ultima 6 with other players and chat with them and do the quests with them. And apparently the full game is there. Now I haven't played the full game through Ultima 6 Online, so I can't completely verify that, but it seemed like the game was there and intact, and it was really a great piece of work. However, I still think you should probably play this alongside with a single-player version to get the full experience, but it's a cool novelty project to be able to play with other players, and if you really fall in love with the game, to find other people who obviously do like the game as well and enjoy it very much if they're playing it online. Now the fourth way is there's actually a 3D remake of Ultima 6 by Team Archon, and the 3D remake, though, it does require for you to have Dungeon Siege 2 because it uses the Dungeon Siege 2 engine, but you can download the supporting files for Ultima 6 for free as long as you have Dungeon Siege 2, which is pretty inexpensive because it is an older game. Now, the one thing, being an older game, Dungeon Siege 2 was released in 2002, the graphics are still one generation behind in terms of 3D graphics, but they're still pretty good. And they're great considering this project was done for free. And it's cool to be able to see some of the things that you don't see in the original Ultima, such as when you put on different armor for your character actually to be wearing that armor. But they also made different improvements to the game itself, such as adding some new side quests and also changing some of the gameplay effects in Ultima 6 from the original version, such as when you fast travel. In the old Ultima 6, if you hadn't been there before, it still take you to that given location using this moonstone, which you use for fast travel. In the remake version, it only take you there if you actually been there in that before. So I think that's some improved gameplay aspects that they've added to that, and they've actually added some value to it. So if you absolutely have to play the 3D version, check out the Team Archon remake version. Now, the fourth way, and I think the best way to play Ultima 6 is the FM Towns version, which gives full voice acting. But it's the hardest way to be able to install Ultima 6 in this method. FM Towns was actually a PC that was released in Japan. And basically, in this given version, all the dialogue is fully voice acted. Now, the voice acting is pretty cheesy, but it's pretty cool to hear it. It saves you some reading, just to be able to hear all the characters actually speak all the dialogue. Also, I think they improved the interface in some aspects when you're talking to different characters. In the PC version, you actually have to remember some of the keywords that highlight and branch out into different topics. It actually shows you the list of keywords that branch out so you can continue the conversation. It's much more flowing that way. Now, the downside of this version is that it's really hard to install. You can download an FM Towns emulator such as Zunes, but it's really difficult to get working. If you're not too technical, you might not have great success with this method. So Ultima 6, to summarize, is a fantastic game by today's standards. Even today, if you discount the aspect of graphics, which I think are still pretty good, but it's one of the most immersive open world games that you can ever play, up there with games like Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. So if you're tired of very linear games and you want to check it out, an inexpensive open world game, I say check out Ultima 6. Happy gaming.
Ah!